On. We are the children. We are the youth of the nation. Look, Maynard. I don't see us like. Okay, there we are. Why does my face come up for the? That's terrible. That's absolutely fucking. Look at the thumbnail. That's the thumbnail. Son of a bitch. I gotta mute this. That's terrible. That's absolutely fucking. Look at the thumbnail. Lordy, lordy, lordy. Control C. Have you called Mrs. Helen?
Okay.
Hello?
Helen, can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
He's not really English. He's just weird.
Yes, I can hear you. Do I sound okay?
You sound great.
Yes, you sound fine.
Okay. Okay, good.
How are you doing today? Very chipper?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I have slayed my daily demons. I don't know what that means, but sounds good. It's just a way to say, like, I got high outside. Anyway. So how are you? How are things?
Really good. It's the weather's been gorgeous here, and I have lots of food growing outside, and
you grow your own
lots
food?
of projects. Yeah. I have a pretty big garden.
Nice. I've never grown my own food before. I've always wanted to. I thought it'd be cool. My mom did when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any space where you can grow things?
Nope.
You live in an apartment?
No, I have a house, but I'm probably too lazy, if we're being honest about it, to grow stuff like that. But I always wanted to.
Yeah.
Hey, you wanna go get Armand real quick?
Yeah. See, I can see his bald spot from here. See him in the bar.
What's up with you today? You're also weird today. You're acting like
What?
You're acting really weird today.
No, I said I can see him from here. His bald spot.
I hear you, but you never referenced him that way before. Anyway.
That's what everybody references about Armand.
You've
That
never
or
done it
docking.
before. You never did before is my point.
Oh, well, yeah. I never got in on the joke. It's a mean joke.
Why is it today then?
I don't know, because I felt like my hair looked good today.
That makes no sense to me.
Just planted my very first garden.
Helen, we are live right now. We usually wait for about 10 minutes, let the audience roll in and get all situated and stuff before we start the show, just so you know. Everybody say hi to Helen. I don't have my chat up on my TV yet, so I don't know if they're saying hi back. I'm sure they are. Let's see, Twitch. We're live on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. Pretty easy to find. Pardon me? Pardon me?
Armand will be with us shortly.
Pardon me? I had my sound on. I was feeding back there.
Oh. No, I was just saying Armand will be with us shortly. Oh, yeah. You know what? I bought a pig, so there's that. I was thinking about telling everyone about my pig that I bought.
Why'd you buy a pig? You don't have a yard for your garden. How do you have a pig?
Well, no, so like I was drunk, and the guy's like, hey, $120 for a pig. And I'm thinking, cool, that's a good fucking deal. Well, I mean, for slaughter, for food.
What size pig is this?
It's a fucking hog.
Where do you put it? Do you still have it?
No, I don't have it. It's going to the slaughter, tomorrow. And I'll get it processed and get my meat. Bacon, sausage,
so you
ham,
never actually had the pig?
Pork chops.
You
No,
just
but
bought the rights
I
to
bought
the
a pig.
See, no, that's very, very... It's like saying I bought a cow and I buy a side of beef.
You didn't buy a cow. I bought a whole pig.
Yeah, well, You make it sound like you had a pet.
No, I never once said I was keeping it. It was a pet or anything. It's just I bought a pig. We are you, Helen. Sorry.
Hey, Helen.
Yeah.
Armand is here.
Armand,
Hi.
can you see us all? I think we're on.
Hi.
I have a different camera setup today than normal. So we're kind of squeezed in.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We're socially undistanced, aren't we? Quite
Yeah, no shit, Armand. Why aren't you 6 feet from me?
close quarters.
Man, I've got so like ideally, Armand, you would have wrote your own questions here.
I have some questions.
Me
Yeah,
too, me
I
too.
was reading part of her book, so
Oh, see that?
Yes.
There, Armand's on it.
yes, I was prepared for this show.
First time for everything.
Not like you two dullards.
Give me a break. We prepare.
Finally have a Harvard person, an Ivy Leaguer on the show.
That is a first. That's true.
Yes, it is. Someone with an education. Let's not make a habit of it, though.
Do we have Dylan on here? He was from Vanderbilt.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's not Ivy
It's
League.
not Ivy League, is it? No.
Dylan.
That's as close as we
Dylan.
get. Yeah.
Dylan.
Hey, Washington U is the Harvard of the Midwest.
Is that right?
Keep telling yourself that.
Yeah, that's what they
Sure,
think.
Armand.
Yeah, I went to Washington U, St. Louis.
Man, there's some like the lingo that they use in the Zendik is pretty. Like some of the lingo is funny. I was reading. You did a really good FAQ here. This is very thorough.
I just reread it myself to refresh my memory.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff here.
Are we live yet? Or?
Yeah. live.
Yeah, we're live, Armand. There are
Well,
people.
why aren't we asking questions then?
Because we haven't started the show.
You know how it is. We always let people show up. You just did a show last week. You already forgot?
It's very slipshod studio here.
How do you feel about Greta?
I resemble that.
lately? How dare you?
I feel about who asked that? Anyone who listens to the show knows how I feel.
What?
All right, we'll give it 2 more minutes. We'll start the show. You guys good?
Knows how you feel about what? Yeah, 2 minutes
Greta,
on
I
me.
thought you. Greta, right?
Oh, how dare you?
Yeah, that.
I think that's why my post last week did so good. I was like, didn't think we were doing a show again? How dare you?
Yes, very popular.
Armand loves Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He just...
Tune into our global warming show sometime when you have a couple hours to kill.
Oh, God, let's not get into that.
Yes, not today, Armand, please.
No global warming today,
I'm going to
Armand.
exact revenge on people at the commune. Make them listen.
Wow. It's going to be a salty day.
Yes.
Bonnie from Scotland. Nice. Hello. Scottish.
Wolf Zendik.
Hit it.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, hold on then.
You got a pen? That's not me. Hey, bring a shrubbery.
You guys ready?
Had about a $30 salad. Yeah.
You're listening to Surreal Talk, a look inside the world of cults, conspiracies, and the paranormal.
Something's not right, man. Something's not right. Something's bullshit here, and I don't believe it.
Honestly, this crazy shit could be completely possible.
Disclaimer, we reserve the right to be wrong, ladies and gentlemen. You think you know the whole story? Do you? Think again.
Know every story.
Now your hosts, Eric and Everett.
Welcome to Surreal Talk, a look inside the world of cults, conspiracies, and the paranormal. A lineupmedia.fm production, and we are back, guys.
Welcome, Armand. Welcome back, Eric. Nice seeing you. It's been a
Nice
week.
seeing you too. And we have got someone else on the line here. Who do we have here?
Let's hop in right into it this week. We have author Helen Zuman, the author of Mating in Captivity. It's a memoir of her 5 years at Zendik Farm. So, Helen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Helen.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for showing and actually coming on. Not that we have a problem with people actually coming on. I put that quite strangely there, didn't I? Thanks for showing up.
So Helen contacted us through email, and she had a few rebukes to the. I forget what episode you had listened
really?
to that you had a few things. What was it?
Heaven's Gate?
The Heaven's
I'm
Gate
pretty
episode.
sure it was Heaven's Gate.
And she had some stuff to say, like we talked about who we thought the sexiest cult leader was, and then yeah. Anyway,
Creepiest.
we were
Who's
wrong.
I think
Creepiest.
it is. Who is the sexiest cult leader, Helen?
No, creepiest.
Oh, creepy.
that's what I meant. Creepiest. Sorry.
Why'd
My
you go to
pick for
sexiest?
creepiest.
Let's have both.
Warren Jeffs.
Oh, that's Warren Jeffs. That's that white-haired guy, yeah.
No. Not yet, anyway. Not the last picture I
Then
saw
I'm not
of him.
familiar with him.
He
Who is
wasn't
that?
the Heaven's Gate guy, was he?
No, he's the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. He was on the run from the FBI. He got sent to jail. He's still in jail, but doing his cult thing anyway.
Wow.
He does look
See,
pretty
now there's
creepy.
a cult leader. That's legitimate.
Right. He's got
Church,
a cult
the Mormons?
still following
They
him
throw
from
him in
jail.
jail, he's still a cult leader.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well.
I don't know. Koresh has got to be. He's the quintessential cult leader, right? I mean, what do you think, Helen? David Koresh?
Yeah, pretty quintessential. Yep.
I don't know.
And look how he ended up.
I wouldn't say they were that great of a cult, to be honest with you.
God,
Branch
what?
Davidians. I mean, as far as cults go, they were pretty normal. They just had a
great
lot of
cult.
guns.
He had to sleep with everybody's daughter and wife.
Yeah.
That's a cult leader.
That's a
I'm
cult.
curious how you would define a great cult.
That's a good point.
Well, with a leader like
I didn't
David
see him
Koresh.
passing out any Kool-Aid. Is my point. You know what I mean? That's,
Well-
I think of the good cults as the ones that are obviously crazy.
Like
Scientology?
James Jones.
Otherwise, I just think of him as a small religion. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Does it help if they all kill themselves, like Heaven's Gate or
That would make him
James
really
Jones?
a good cult, in my opinion. Not a great religion.
I'll defer to the expert.
Yeah, so what makes
would you say?
the Zendik Farm? You lived at the
Yeah.
Zendik Farm. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what makes you call it a cult?
Yeah, so Zendik Farm was started in 1969 by Wolf and Errol Zendik. It came out of the counterculture and the Back to the Land movement. They were both artists. They believed in total honesty, wanted to create a place where they could practice that with each other and others. Wolf had already set himself up as a guru. He had developed a following in Laurel Canyon in Hollywood, and he had met Errol, who was 20 years younger than he was, and also had recently gone through some severe trauma in her life. So he had people who were kind of into his shtick, but Errol was really his first follower, in the sense that she was the first one who really kind of gave her life to him. So they started this. They moved to an actual farm in Los Angeles. I think the property belonged to one of their parents, and people started showing up, and so my understanding is that the farm started out as just a bunch of people kind of gathered around this charismatic couple, and then over time became kind of more ritualized. There were more rules. The ways of making money became more formal. So it became much more structured over time. As far as why I call it a cult, there are various checklists that you can look at that will enumerate the characteristics of a cult, and Zendik checks most of those boxes.
Sure.
However, my basic definition of a cult that I've come to after many, many years of thinking and writing about this and talking to my ex-Zendik friends and other former cultists is it's a set of patterns that combines to strip the individual of self-trust. And like one pattern is not having access to your own money. So let's say you don't agree with something that the leader is doing. Well, you can't just leave. Not in the world as it is. You're going to be up shit creek without any money.
Am I wrong? Sorry.
I was just
There
saying
is
something
a
about Scientology,
relationship. There can be certainly a relationship there. That's an example. Or just like when I lived at Zendik, when I moved there, I was told that anything that I thought I was good at, that was just death culture bullshit. Like, for example, I had worked at a restaurant and I had learned that it's much easier to peel garlic if you crush the clove with the flat part of a knife first.
Yeah.
And I did this in the kitchen while I was cooking it, and someone was like, well, that's just like death culture stuff.
So death culture is the phrase that they use to refer to anything outside world, right?
Yeah, death culture is the outside world.
Okay.
So basically anything that you bring with you from your time before Zendik is suspect, is corrupt, is something you have to change. And that's a really good way also to get people to not trust themselves.
Now, in that regard, did they make you change the way you dressed? Did everybody, was there a dress code or anything like that? If they're stripping you from your previous life?
Well, there wasn't an explicit dress code, but there was certainly a way of dressing. When I moved there, what I saw, most of the women wore tie-dye t-shirts with super low necklines. I don't know where that came from. Maybe they were probably just imitating Errol and her daughter Fawn, who were sort of the trendsetters and everything. So like tie-dye t-shirts, jeans. The men often wore Carhartts because you could hang tools off them. People didn't wear clothing with logos on it unless they were Zendik logos. And we made our own t-shirts. This had Stop Bitching, Start a Revolution, and had other designs on them. So a lot of Zendik clothing was Zendik propaganda.
Sure.
So were the excuse me, the founders, Wolf and Arrow, were they really like nice people as far as like when you first meet them? Were they were charming, charismatic, they were easy to get along with and talk to?
Well, I never met Wolf. He died a few months before I arrived at the farm.
Okay.
I mean, I have heard reports about him. There are definitely people who liked him and other people who didn't like him as much. When I first met Errol, she just struck me as very intense. She wasn't necessarily friendly. She made some nasty comments about New York City, where I was from and where she was also from. But I was intrigued by her, and she seemed very sure of herself and kind of mysterious. And I just wanted to sort of live up to her expectations. That was kind of my initial impression.
Right. So what hooked you? As someone that was a former cult member, you were completely bought into this, right? What was the allure? What made it to where it was like, you were like, you know what, this is right. This is what I need to do. Like, what was the...
Can I step back a little bit and ask a couple questions? What year was it whenever you arrived, and how old were you?
It was 1999, and I was 22.
You were 22, and how old was Errol at that point? Roughly.
She was born in 1938.
She was 61, and I was reading the book.
61.
So I remember.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she was basically old enough to be a mother, even nearly a grandmother figure.
Grandmother, 61, yeah.
Well, maybe not grandmother, but close. I mean, I guess she could have been.
How many people were there?
There were about 55 or 60 people when I showed up.
About half and half, male and female, or?
There were more men than women.
Sausage party.
Yeah.
Was it dormitories, and were they co-ed?
There were dormitories. Some were co-ed and some weren't. Mostly they were co-ed.
How did they get to decide who had to go to the non-co-ed ones?
Well, like when I first showed
Punishment?
up, the farm was in a very primitive condition because the whole farm had recently moved from Florida to North Carolina to a piece of property that had been neglected for a really long time. So when I got there, most of the men, the lower ranking men, were sleeping in the loft of this big horse barn. And most of the lower ranking women were sleeping in a room in the farmhouse, which was an insulated building. So at that time, it was just divided up like the men are stronger, they can take it, they go to the barn. However, the new people also went to the barn. So when I first arrived, I was put in an insulated room in the back of the barn loft with a bunch of guys because there weren't any other new people at the time who were female. So I just got dumped in there. I mean, in general, I would say there was just not an emphasis on keeping the genders separate in our sleeping arrangements.
I'm sure there wasn't like a problem like sexual harassment or anything like that. Since it's a commune, generally there's a certain mentality of people that are there. I would assume that wouldn't gravitate towards. I mean, there probably were a couple alpha guys that are assholes, but
like this room. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I first got there, it was certainly a shock to me to be in this room full of guys. I wasn't expecting that, but I got used to it.
Now, you mentioned, is there some sort of hierarchy as far as, is that based on seniority or what?
The hierarchy was based first on blood relationship to Errol and Wolf. That was the best thing you could have in your corner if you wanted to move up.
Makes sense.
The next best thing was being in a romantic relationship with Errol or her daughter Fawn. So if you're female, you're out of luck in that regard. And then after that, I would say the best ways to move up were either to donate large sums of money to the farm or to be a really amazing seller, going out in the street and selling the Zendik magazines, CDs, T-shirts, stickers, and such. Being really good at that was helpful as well.
So I would think wasn't that kind of disillusioning for you? Because that's not why you joined up, right? I thought you were kind of...
we got to make money somehow. I mean,
I don't know. I don't think if you read her book, it seemed like she didn't think that was part of the whole deal. That was what she was leaving.
So you're like anti-capitalist before you went there.
Yeah, that was part of, right? Wasn't that part of the reason for you going there?
Pretty much, yeah. I actually helped organize a protest against Alan Greenspan at my Harvard graduation.
Ooh,
like 150 of us
walked
out of Harvard Yard carrying huge red balloons to protest the fact that he was a banker, basically.
Yeah, fuck
So, yeah, I was not into capitalism. At the time I arrived, most people who moved to Zendik found out about it because they had bought a magazine on the street from a Zendik. But I found out it from a book, the Communities Directory, which is an unvetted collection of listings of various groups, mostly in North America. They're not checking to see who's a cult or not. So I found the group in a book, and so I didn't see the magazine until I was in a car on the way from the local bus station to the farm, and I didn't find out that they sold stuff on the street until after I had arrived, and that really surprised me. I assumed that they handed out their literature for free. So I didn't know about selling before I arrived.
Was the literature basically aimed at recruiting?
Well,
propaganda-like?
There were aspects of it that I think might have helped with recruiting. Like Wolf would write these rants against the death culture that could certainly appeal to the average audience member at Ozfest or something, but I don't know that it was really so directed at recruiting. I mean, if it was, I don't think it worked very well. It was more just propaganda. It was more just like
trying to get that message out to the like-minded people, who believe that same sort of stuff.
So were
makes good sense.
Were you searching for anything in your life? Like, what made you want to go here? What made you think this was the right choice?
And was it a conscious decision to go there?
Well, it was I would say there are two different stages to my recruitment. To my becoming a true believer, and one was simply showing up. And the other one was deciding to stay. And there were different things that caused me to show up than that caused me to stay. So I showed up seeking meaning and purpose and belonging, practical skills, farming skills, for example, that I had not learned in school. I had received a fellowship from Harvard before I graduated to explore intentional communities. So, and I was intrigued by Zendik in particular because they claimed to do a lot of art and a lot of farming. So I thought it was great. I could do both. I might be going off kind of into the backwoods in the middle of nowhere, but I wouldn't be leaving behind, my ability to be an artist. So that's kind of and then I was also attracted by, for example, there was an essay on the Zendik website called The Big Lie. And it was about how everyone was lying to each other all the time. And I was in a place in my life where I was like, fuck yeah, that is true. I had just seen the movie The Matrix, and I was like, yes, I'm living in the Matrix. I need to get out. And I saw Zendik as my way out. Then after I got there, the attractors kind of changed. One thing was I met all these people, and I was really impressed by them. Mostly young, a lot of hot guys. The women were all like pretty attractive. I was like, wow, if I stay here, am I going to become as sexy as they are?
It's got to be pretty alluring. I mean,
yeah.
Let's.
And then when I learned about how dating worked, that was appealing to me.
So yeah, I'd read that, like the official synopsis. As soon as you
Let's
get on Amazon.
Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This was a sex cult, everyone. We've kind of steered away from saying that thus far, but I mean, pretty much this was a sex cult.
What I'm getting at is at the beginning, like the synopsis on Amazon, it says you're excited to learn that that's the way they called, or the way this place operated. There was a third-party intermediary who had arranged basically sexual partners. If I read it correctly.
Right. Yeah. So the intermediary wasn't choosing who got together with whom. It was just that if I was interested in a guy, then I would ask one of the two dating straighters, straighterer is short for administrator, to hit up so-and-so for a walk, which meant just hanging out, groping, talking, kissing, not getting naked, or for a date, which meant going to a private location, like a designated date space, to have sex of one kind or another and get naked. So to me, this sounded really great because I was a total retard at the mating dance. I did not know how to do this. So I was like, great, I got someone in my corner for the first time ever.
Yeah, Armand, I think you're ready to join, aren't you?
I don't know. I'd like to get some more information.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to get some more information.
Did they encourage safe sex practices at all, or I mean, do they? This was this early 2000s. You would think that
1999. So
I was practicing safe sex then.
So actually, at Zendik, we were not allowed to use condoms until about 2004.
Wow.
And my perception of why this was the case is that when Wolf was alive, so Wolf had sex with pretty much every woman on the farm.
As he should, as a good cult leader would do.
Wolf didn't like condoms. And so he preferred that the responsibility for birth control should lie entirely with the women via a variation on the rhythm method.
What an aptly named wolf,
this survived for about 5 years after his death. Finally, in 2004, Errol said it was okay to use condoms some of the time, but you had to get permission on a case-by-case basis to use a condom.
That sounds very practical.
Let me ask you this. On what reasons would they approve or deny a hookup or what was a date? And what was the walk or a date? Why would they approve or deny something like that?
Well, so hitting up someone for a walk or a date, the third party was acting purely as an intermediary. They weren't saying yes or no. It was up to the person being asked.
Oh, okay. Could you go to them? Could you just go to the other person, or did you have to have the...
Well, so the rules changed. When I first got there, you had to use the intermediary. I don't know when it was, maybe a year or two later, Errol changed the rules. She decided no more third party. You have to go make your request directly to the person. And then there was another time when the rule was you were supposed to use a third party, but you could ask anyone to be your third party.
Oh, okay.
So could you be a couple though? I mean, say you met someone you really liked and you went for a walk and then escalated into a date, and then you were, say exclusive, right? That you couldn't have that?
Well, yes and no. You could have that probably for a limited amount of time. So I'll just go with my experience as being fairly representative. When I lived at the farm, I had 2 relationships that lasted like 4 months, and one that lasted maybe 4 months the first time around, and like a whopping 9 months the second time around. The thing was that if 2 people got together and were together for a while and didn't really want to be intimate with anybody else, at some point, Errol or Fawn or someone else higher up in the group was going to say to those people, you guys are square, you're in a bubble, you're fucking with our survival, and they were going to have to break up. That's what happened every time to any couple that didn't involve Errol or Fawn.
So if you were a couple with them, could anyone still have sex with them? I mean, were you allowed to say no? Is what I'm getting like, hey, I can't have sex with you. I'm with her. Like, is that
you were allowed to say no, but there was pressure sometimes to say yes, and you didn't want to. So if there were 2 people who were in a relationship who were really devoted to each other, and they were getting shit about being too into each other, one way to deflect the pressure would be for one or both of them to have a date with somebody else. And often that was an explicit suggestion. You should have a date with someone else. You guys should be having dates with other people so that you don't get too caught up in each other.
See, I would say that makes perfect sense, that monogamy and marriage are basically a real big part of what death culture could be considered for these people. If they're wanting to get away from everything that the society stands for as a standard, I mean, monogamy and 1 + 1 = 2 man and woman would be the thing to get away from.
Yes, I mean they're flouting all those conventions.
Sure.
Well, however, there was a fair amount of hypocrisy in that respect. The underlying reason for preventing monogamy didn't really have much to do with the death culture or making a positive change. It mostly had to do with, and this was not something Errol ever said, but the purpose of that was just to keep the loyalty of each individual primarily for Errol and not allow it to be diluted by loyalty to someone else.
That makes
sense. And actually, after I left and after Errol had a nervous breakdown that prevented her from being as fully in control as she had been, and her daughter Fawn took over, Fawn got married. And once Fawn got married, a bunch of the other Zendik women also got married. So it didn't have, there was not a consistent ethic.
It would make sense that you wouldn't want to allow subgroupings to form if you're trying to maintain control of a population. Sure, small relationships make sense, but if you start to have subunits that could mean more as a subunit than like the whole, like say two people got together and had a child at that point, now they're a solid unit that might want to leave. You know what I mean? And run their own life. Why would you want to perpetuate that?
That's what I was going to ask. Could you leave at any time? Were you coerced into staying, or was it always voluntary?
Yes and no. Okay. You could, certainly on a practical level, you could always walk away. There were no physical restraints. However, there was an extremely powerful restraint on a mental, emotional, psychological level. I think of living at Zendik as living inside this really powerful story. And when I lived there, my story was that Zendik was the only worthwhile thing I could possibly do with my life. The outside world was a death culture where people were lying all the time. If I left, I would never have an honest relationship with a man. I would never have a real friend. I would never, fully enjoy myself or laugh. And I might actually die kind of as punishment for betraying all of life.
Did they believe in a god or a higher power at all? Was there any god or anything like that involved here?
Well, we talked about this concept of pre-evolution as being our religion, creative evolution. Wolf didn't actually come up with that term, but we thought that he did. That was, and we talked about cosmic consciousness.
Really?
Stuff like that.
So this sounds like a real life hippie commune right out of the early 70s, right after the Summer of Love. You know what I mean?
That is how it started.
Well, the question when you first joined, I guess is the word. Was this supposed to be a permanent thing? Because it sounds like you were just out of college and you're just kind of coming to grips with things, which we all kind of do at 22 or 23, and and sick of the hypocrisy of the world and just kind of finding yourself. But you were like, okay, this is paradise, this is Eden, I'm going to stay here forever.
Or were you even thinking that far ahead?
Yeah. Or was it just, I'm going to try it and then move on?
Yeah.
Because you've been to other places, right, Helen?
Yeah, I had been to a bunch of other places that first summer after college and just hadn't really, certainly hadn't fallen in love with any of them. So by the time I got to Zendik, I had been other places and I had a basis for comparison. But when I bought my bus ticket to go to North Carolina, I just figured I would go for a couple of weeks. And if I didn't like it, I would leave and go hike the Appalachian Trail. I didn't go there planning to move in. I just went there planning to check it out. And I didn't commit till, it didn't take me long. It took me about 2 weeks to give them all of my money. That was my commitment. And when I handed over my money, it was $13,000, which was all but $500 of the grant that I had received from my college. When I handed over that money, that was me saying, I'm here. This is it.
It's like you're saying, I'm stepping out of society. This is for sure. I'm here.
Yes. This is my new family, my new friends. This is what I'm doing with my life.
Would you have stayed without giving the money? Or did they insist?
Could you have stayed?
Yeah. I was unusually quick to hand over my money. But if I hadn't done it quickly, I would have been pressured into doing it eventually. Oh, yeah. You were not allowed to stay there and keep your own assets.
So did you see? Oh, sorry, I got a real one. Did you ever see anyone who didn't make the choice to stay, and were they pressured even by force to leave? Like, did you ever see it go bad in that regard?
They had to escort guys up with guns.
Yeah, well, there was an instance in which a man and his girlfriend were leaving together, and Zoe, who was the farm's alpha male, claimed that this man was taking camera equipment that belonged to the farm. The man leaving said it was his, he had brought with him, and the one leaving was a very large person. Zoe was a small person, and so Zoe brought out the guns. But I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
I just mean, at any point where somebody had the money and they keep, like you said, you'd been pressured to eventually give the money up, where they didn't, and where they were eventually like, you know what, if you're not doing it, get out of here.
Well, so the one case I remember that was similar to that, there was a woman who was at the farm for maybe a year or so, and she had a car. So if you had a car, you were going to have to give that up eventually too. Sure. So she had this car. I would say she probably held on to her car longer than most people. And Errol at one point did give her an ultimatum. She was like, give us the car or get out. And the woman got in her little white car and drove away.
Good. I got a couple questions for you. So were homosexual activities allowed?
They were allowed and in some cases encouraged as a way to work out your fantasies or explore the full range of your sexuality.
Dude on dude and chick on chick? I mean, the whole deal or what?
Both, yes. Okay. But in terms of that being the basis for a long-term relationship, Wolf had said that was bad because he had this thing called the protoneutronic principle, which meant that like a man completes a woman, and that's the only way it works, and you can't really find true union with another human being outside that paradigm.
So if a child grew up there, how old did the child have to be before being considered voluntary for dates? Like how old was did they have to?
So
did you guys follow? Yeah, did you guys follow the standard like modern law, or was that death culture like 18, or how did that go?
Well, so when I moved there were two teenagers there who had been born on the farm. I don't know what happened with the male teenager in terms of his introduction to sex. I did hear some pretty bad news about how the woman how she was introduced to sexuality, that it wasn't necessarily voluntary and she wasn't ready.
Damn.
So there was instances of rape, was what you're saying, from time to time on the farm.
I feel like I don't have the standing to say that about this woman's experience. Like she would have to say that.
Fair, that's fair.
But from what I heard, I would say yes. From what I heard.
Borderline non-consensual. If not rape, there was at least probably borderline non-consensual encounters.
Well, not only that, but if she was underage, that's statutory rape.
True. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn.
Well, that's interesting that obviously this. So when you were there, the woman was in charge, right? So that's kind of contrary to most cults, wouldn't we say?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are other examples of that. I mean, there's Bonnie and Marshall, Heaven's Gate. There's Elizabeth Clare Prophet took over from Mark Prophet in the Church Universal and Triumphant after he died. I think there are probably other examples too of husband and wife teams.
Used to be Scientology, but whatever happened to Miss Miscavige, she's gone now. You know about David Miscavige, his wife, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's your views on Scientology? Do you feel they're borderline cult-like, or do you think they just have enough influence to where they've basically bastardized the term religion for their purposes?
Oh, they're definitely a cult.
Beautiful.
I attended the International Cultic Studies Association conference a couple years ago, which is the only place where the most common icebreaker is, so what cult did you belong to? And there were many Scientologists there, so I heard a lot firsthand about Scientology from people who've been members of it. Also, there was a panel that I attended led by second-generation cultists, including some from Scientology, people who had been born into Scientology or other groups, and the devastating effects it had on them. So yes, Scientology, absolutely cult.
So when you say devastating effects, I mean, you seem to be reasonably normal, especially for this show. So it doesn't seem to have affected you long term. Well,
I read once that there's a rule of thumb about being in a cult, that it takes you twice as long to recover, like if you were as the time that you spent there. So I spent 5 years at Zendik, and I left in 2004. So I've been gone for almost 16 years now. And how I think about it is that it's a composting process. Like, I left with a lot of stinky, traumatic, ugly guck. You know, this huge like scrap heap of, you know, of trouble. And I put a lot of time and effort into composting it into a source of fertility, which makes it possible for me to have dispassionate conversations about it now. But but I think if you leave a cult and you don't ever understand what happened to you, and if you just like put it away under a plastic tarp or shove it in the closet, it can stay volatile and virulent for a really long time.
Do you keep up with any members of people that were in the cult with you or lived at Zendik these days?
Yeah, I do. I mean, many of my very best friends in the world are people who lived there.
Do any of them, and I don't want you to really put out direct examples, do any of them have worse of a time now recovering from their time there? Do they have any more post-traumatic type stress or anything like that?
Well, I'm thinking of one man in particular who didn't talk about his time at Zendik for maybe 15 years and still kind of has a hard time talking about it. And I think it does definitely affect him. Yeah.
So when did it first occur to you that this wasn't like one of these Edenish
utopian
like,
society?
Yes, like Oneida or Bloomsbury Group or whatever, and this is a cult. Was there any specific incident? Like, wait a minute, it's not quite what I thought it was.
I knew from very early on that it wasn't utopia or Eden. I didn't choose to move in or give them all my money or commit for life because I thought it was Eden. I mean, I had some awful experiences even just within my first week there. The thing was, I also adopted this idea that all of this pain was worth something because we were saving the planet from ecocide. We were creating another culture. And so I thought even the most miserable day I was having at Zendik, it was better than the best day in the death culture. And it was all part of like the fire of transforming myself into a new and better kind of human. So I wasn't staying because it was all fun and games. As far as having my first inkling that Zendik was a cult, I didn't get to that point until more than a year after I left. I was kicked out. And when I was kicked out, I was still a true believer.
What were you kicked out for?
Well, there are a number of layers to that answer.
All right, here we go.
The surface layer was I had done very badly on a number of selling trips. At that time, it was good to make about $300 a day on a selling trip. And I kept making $88. I just did. And this was not good for the cause. Also, one of the things that kept me at Zendik was that I truly believed this was the only place in the world where I could develop an honest, lasting relationship with a man. In fact, it was the opposite, but this is what I believed. And about a year before I left, I had gone through what I thought was my big chance for that to happen when Errol was kind of mentoring me with this guy that I was with. After that relationship dissolved, partly because of Errol attacking it, I lost hope for having that relationship. I thought I wasn't worthy and it was never going to happen for me. And I think that did make me kind of lose heart on a subconscious level. I never consciously thought Zendik's not worth it. I can't get what I want here. But I think there was maybe a little bit of that and that might have played into my inability to sell well, and Errol might have sensed it. So there's that layer of it, of like what was actually happening personally for me. But then there were other layers too that had nothing to do with me, and they had more to do with group cohesion. For the group to stay together, Errol needed periodically to get rid of people in order to remind those who remained both that they were even more chosen and more special than they thought they were because they could make it while this other person couldn't, but also to remind them that they had better, work harder and really come up with it, or that could happen to them.
That makes a good sense at a strategic point, like calling of the herd to show that whoever's left, to reaffirm their true believer status.
Was sex ever used as a weapon, like a incentive, or even like do this, have sex and then this? Like, was it ever used?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But say people, it sounds like though, if you weren't, it's almost like the mob. If you're not a producer, and that means money. So you're kind of blacklisted right there, right?
It's an earner.
Yeah, but there were but that standard didn't apply across the board. Generally, it certainly didn't apply to Errol and Fawn and members of their inner circle. They didn't generally have to go out and make money. It also applied more to women than to men. There were a number of men who were considered basically hopeless at selling, and they didn't really have to do it. They could stay home and do stuff at the farm or produce the magazine or whatever. So there was much more pressure on women to.
Who did you write for the magazine? Because
I did write for the magazine.
You're a pretty good writer. I was reading your book, and
that's high praise coming from Armand. This man's a lifelong writer. He's a screenwriter extraordinaire.
Yes, I have rejection slips from some of the best agents in Hollywood.
There you go.
But yeah, so I guess that's what was the content of the magazine?
Well, the content of the magazine changed kind of a lot between the time that I arrived and the sort of tail end of the farm's existence. When I first arrived, there was plenty of philosophizing by Wolf and Errol, but there were also a fair number of personal stories by just average Zendiks. But those stories hewed to a very precise storyline, which was some version of, my life was hell, I found Zendik, now it's great.
So it's kind of a recruiting tool, right?
Well, yeah, I suppose it was. And then, but as years went by and more people left, the magazine became more and more just Errol and Wolf and maybe Fawn, with a bunch of art too. So there were not many voices left in it by the end. Yeah.
And you guys just sold this on the streets, or was it like you had the airports, like the old who were those?
Like the movie?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
No, we sold on the streets. Like actually in Chicago, we used to go to Wicker Park, Belmont and Clark, Tinley Park. I guess it's probably named after a bank now. So we would go to busy street corners in cities all over the Southeast and the Northeast and sometimes the Midwest. We would also go to festivals, like big multi-day festivals, and we would go to concerts like Ozfest. And we would go to Mardi Gras in New Orleans every year. Like our sweet spot was usually places where there were lots of people and they were drunk.
I just say drunk people.
Drunk people.
Yeah,
lots of drunk people.
Were you guys allowed to party?
College campuses. Actually, my very first selling day was in Athens, Georgia, right near the University of Georgia campus. Yeah. One time we actually sold in the campus of Duke University, but not college campuses were not so great.
Were you guys allowed to party? Drink, smoke pot, things like that? I mean, were you guys allowed? As a hippie cult, I would think you would smoke pot, right?
Well, but it wasn't really a hippie cult anymore by the time I arrived. So back in the day, there was a time, I think it was probably in the 70s, maybe even the 80s, the Zendiks actually grew pot, like in large quantities.
I was going to say that there had to be eventually at some point they were growing pot. That's why these
they were.
That's a given, yeah.
And I heard that at one point each Zendik got a weekly ration of pot and peanut butter.
How much pot? How much
How
peanut
much
butter?
peanut butter?
I don't know.
Fuck your peanut butter.
And I think that there was also a period when there were plenty of hard drugs on the farm, but that was all before my time. By the time I arrived, there was no pot. Pot was expressly forbidden. There were no other drugs. I mean, there was some illicit pot, like anyone who showed up with pot, pot was confiscated, and the confiscated pot went somewhere.
Yes,
I don't think it got thrown in the lake.
Yeah.
As far as partying, we did have parties occasionally with alcohol. The alcohol was rationed. Like, you get 2 beers, or you get like 1 mixed drink and a beer or whatever. Plenty of people found ways to get more than their share and ended up super drunk.
Sounds like a high school party or something like that.
Yeah. So and those parties, they were really fun. And I mean, for me, like I think I had maybe like 1 or 2 drinks in my life before I arrived at Zendik, and it was very easy for me to get a buzz.
Say 2 beers and you're probably,
Oh yeah, I was good.
So it sounds like, and then as soon as you got there, they put you to work. So what was the work? Were the work assignments? Sounds like pretty hard work too. Not just farming, right? They were.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they're renovating it when you got there.
Yeah. There was a lot of landscaping going on, building rock walls, building, various outbuildings. At one point, we built this huge, really beautiful kitchen dining hall, a large part of it out of cordwood, which is just a very intensive building process that you can do if you have lots and lots of people who aren't getting paid. So there was building, there was landscaping, cooking, cleaning, painting, making things, plumbing, electrical, growing food, milking the goats, taking care of the horses, and then the selling. And the selling was really hard work too. And prepping for the selling, we took all our food and our water, our bedding, we took everything with us. So there was always plenty of work to do.
So Light Peach in the chat brings up a really good point, Helen. And I don't take any offense to this, but do you feel like that you were maybe the perfect person for them to target for this sort of cult? Because you were young, you were fresh.
Idealistic.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, do you think that, you said you hadn't drank much before, do you think that you were a good target for
maybe
this?
a little naive?
I wouldn't say she was targeted from the sound of it. I mean, it sounds like
but I'm saying
she found it because that's the type of thing she was looking for.
Sounds like she was a good candidate, though, if you want a member.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is another yes and no. I mean, one major determiner of whether someone will enter a cult or not is being at a point of transition in your life, a point where you're not really tied to anything and where you're in between stories. That was definitely true of me at the time. As far as my idealism, my near teetotalism, I was pretty different from most other people who came to the farm. I mean, a lot of them, they had spent years smoking pot and partying and all this stuff. I do think, as far as the idealism, though, that I think something that all of us who moved to Zendik shared was just a real discontent with business as usual and just knowing like something better is possible and we are willing to work our butts off to try to make this real.
Do you still have that philosophy?
Yes and no. I mean, I have made a perfectly good life for myself in the world as it is, and I also see that what passes for an economy is completely disconnected from the web of life that supports it. Yeah, I would still say, I would still say the world, shit's fucked up and bullshit. Absolutely.
Agreed.
And I've developed, much better strategies for living my life anyway.
So how much sex did you guys have? I mean, it wasn't primarily a sex cult, right? Like,
Can you describe them in detail?
No, I'm just saying
it was encounter.
Yeah,
we have time.
I'm saying
videos.
The main focus of this cult was not sex, right? I mean, it was trying to make money, or was it sex?
Okay, so let's just talk about the term sex cult.
Okay, please. Thank you.
So it's true. I named my book Mating in Captivity, and I chose to focus on sexuality because I saw that as the most intimate form of control, and I didn't want the book to be 800 pages long. So I did choose that as a through line. And it was a big part of life there.
Sure.
But
I think it's a good sales plan too.
We were doing so much else. So it wasn't like we were having
Not
sex
just
all the time.
sex.
Right.
Okay.
Not at all. And I mean, the sex all had to happen.
That's my
at
after
night
lunch
anyway.
orgy. Gotta go.
After your really long day of work, that was when you got to go to the date space and have sex. So
Hey.
even in terms of time, it wasn't it wasn't some huge part of it. But as far as how much sex people had, now for me in particular, I mean, I'm guessing I had a lot more sex there than I would have if I had not gone there. And I would, so most often the more common pattern at Zendik was for the man to hit up the woman for a date. And I was kind of an exception to that rule. Like, I was the girl most likely to hit up the guy herself. I did that a lot. And I was really eager to experience the varieties of sexual experience. However, as I said earlier, the male-female ratio tended to be off. And so if you were a guy, it didn't necessarily work out so well for you. If you were lower ranking, maybe you were not having so much sex.
So were there guys there that didn't have any sex at all?
There may have been, I don't know for sure. There were certainly guys there who had very little sex.
Okay, right on. Did you guys ever have sex out in front of people? I don't understand.
Orgies or group sex?
Yeah, stuff like that. Well, not group sex so much, but yeah, voyeurism. There you
go. Not in my time, and not that I know of. I did hear one story of a woman who was told that she had to have a chaperone on her dates. That's the only thing I heard of in that regard. There might have been more stuff like that going on before I arrived, but that's all I know of.
So if you encountered, say, Eric on one of your trips or whatever, I'm talking about, and you were going to recruit him, what did you say to people? How did you recruit? Or they just came to you? There was no recruiting.
Well, so
sex call party too. Let's go.
Okay, well that's probably how I do it.
So in terms of recruiting on the street, so sometimes I would meet someone on the street who I had a really good connection with, and we had a really good conversation. I felt like, oh, this person really gets Zendik. And in that case, I might say, well, you can always come visit if you want. But I was never out there primarily for the purpose of recruiting. Making money was the number one thing. And then if we found someone cool who ended up working out as a Zendik, then that was good too.
I was going to say, it would almost have to be very social at first and an organic onboarding almost. They have to, like you said, become friends with them, cool enough to come visit. They like the culture enough to where they can be invited in and as well.
So you had visitors regularly then?
Yeah, we had plenty of visitors.
Okay.
What percentage of them would you say stayed and left?
Well, yeah. So there was this distinction between visitors and new people, and visitors were sometimes people who were explicitly just coming to visit, and
that was allowed. So that was allowed.
Yeah, that was allowed. Also, anyone who did come to visit was going to be asked over and over again. So, how long are you planning to stay, or are you maybe gonna move in? But the ratio of visitors, people who stayed, was pretty small. And then taking the next step to to being a new person, being like, well, I want to live here. I mean, a lot of those people, they didn't stay either. I mean, in my first winter at Zendik, I would say there might have been 10 or 12 new people. And I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 of them ended up staying more than a year, something like that. Very roughly.
Is that your typical turnover rate then? Maybe 20% every year you would change? Because you said about 50? It was 50 to 60?
Well, I wouldn't say it was really regular. There was kind of a big purge, I think, that happened after the move to North Carolina. By the time we left for West Virginia in late 2004, there were only about 35 people at the farm. And I think part of that had to do with Errol wanting to get rid of longtime members who had close relationships with Wolf and who felt threatening to her. And And also she was in the process of exerting more direct control over the group. So that's the number of people I remember. Like, I know that there were this X number of people living there in 99 and X number in 2004. But as far as like the people who sort of came for a short time, you know, who never really registered to me as like being part of the group, I don't really remember how many of those there were.
Sure. I'm starting to get the feeling, you know, a distinction in this type of cult and other types of cults. This is much more of a, not a Heaven's Gate type cult where it's a religious type cult. It's more like what's a good example here? I just haven't lost it, of a cult that, well, I guess even the Branch Davidians, they were religious as well. Give me another example of a cult here that didn't have a religious.
It's not religious.
Yeah.
I mean, Scientology. They're
No,
The Mansons.
The Mansons. That's the one
Before
exactly
they,
in my head.
you know, went
the Mansons.
off the rails.
If you can call them a cult, so to speak. I guess it was a small cult, and you know, he had a small following, but they operated in much the same way. It wasn't more about religion. It was more about being a part of a group, having a group goal, more or less, and a leader in charge, making sure that goal happens. Not so much playing on your afterlife fantasies, more or less your during life fantasies of belonging.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really have afterlife fantasies, but we did say that we had a religion, and we did have kind of a cosmology, and we did have like weird beliefs, including our belief in psychic cause and effect, which was a harsher version of the law of attraction as purveyed in the book The Secret. We believed that everything that happens to you happens because you, quote, vibed into it. There's no such thing as an accident. Like Errol explicitly said, everyone who died in 9/11 died because they wanted to die. So we believed that, and that belief shaped our everyday lives.
And
So
was this religious belief mandatory after a period of time that you got with the program, more or less, and took on this belief system?
Yeah, I mean, you weren't going to say it's Zendik if you didn't believe it, because like one aspect of living at the farm was something called living therapy, you know, in which we were criticizing each other, and a common theme of that criticism, if something bad happened to you, was like, well, how'd you vibe into that? So if you didn't believe in that, you were like, I didn't vibe into that, like that other person fucked up. You would not be allowed to get away with that. You had to believe.
Fair enough. You'd have too many people calling you out. That makes sense.
Right.
It sounds like, did you have to swear fealty to Errol or something? I mean, whatever Errol said, you had to, you know, was there any kind of...
like a lordship?
Yeah, like a military kind, almost like, you know, she's the leader. And,
I was almost, is it or even deification?
Well,
yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, whatever Errol said went.
Okay, it was
and
law. Okay.
We all knew that. And also, shortly after I arrived, on December 31st, 1999, which you may remember in relation to Y2K, we had a ceremony in a dance studio on the farm. We had this ceremony right before midnight, and everybody except Errol and the children were in the room, and each of us took turns saying a 3-part vow that we had all memorized. That was basically a vow of loyalty to Zendik, and we each received a necklace with a brass and copper circle Z on it. That was going to be our mark when we went out into the world that we were Zendiks. So that was an explicit act of pledging loyalty to the farm, and really, I would say pledging loyalty to the farm meant pledging loyalty to Errol.
Was there any backlash from the surrounding communities? We had one of our people in our chat was asking, they're from North Carolina and said the area is pretty conservative. How did the communities at large feel about you guys living together? And
it's possible that there were people in the surrounding area who thought we were weird, but I had almost no interaction with anybody else who lived nearby, and the farm was pretty isolated. We were like way in the backwoods. However, Errol was pretty good at getting along with the neighbors. Like, she knew that she had to, or bad things were going to happen. So she developed pretty cozy relationships with, you know, some of the more powerful people nearby. And then there was this guy, Ben, who used to like give us all his sort of slightly rotten apple crop sometimes, and also would come over and bring moonshine and go up to the barns and just hand out moonshine. And then Errol also had a good relationship with this guy who he owned a huge amount of property like right near the farm, and she became friends with the caretaker of that property, and they would trade things. Like basically she would trade him our labor, like many hours of our sweat, for use of, his backhoe, stuff like that. So I think the neighbors' basic perception of us was that we were, like honest, hardworking people, and we were definitely hardworking, and they may have had questions about the other things that we did, but we didn't bother anybody, and we didn't have any trouble in North Carolina.
I would say that most people wouldn't from the outside look at this group of people and think cult. They're not cult-like from the outside until you start looking at the minutia of their life, that it becomes cult-like.
Right.
The way they handle sexual relationships, even personal relationships, the way money is handled, the forced religion, more or less. I mean, yeah, when you get down to the minutia, they're a cult, but from the outside, they look like just a pretty much a normal commune, in my opinion.
Well, isn't that a cult?
Communes generally, no. I think
what constitutes a cult?
Well, there are so few actual communes. Often groups that I would consider cults are called communes, and many people call Zendik Farm a commune, but I won't do that, because to me, a commune is a group where the entire collective jointly controls the money and owns the land and participates in governance according to rules that everyone understands. And there are a few actual communes that I know of in the United States, but there aren't very many.
It's like a kibbutz in Israel. That's more, right? Isn't that what you're talking about? That's a farming commune.
Yeah, I'm not sure how kibbutzes are governed.
I think that theoretically. Do you think that's possible, Helen? I mean now.
I think what's possible.
Well, to have, this more or less socialist kind of everybody shares in the work, and from each according to his ability, to each according to their need, and
Well, yes, I do, because there are examples of that I have visited. So in the United States, there's a group called the Federation of Egalitarian Communities. In order to belong to this organization, the commune has to follow all these guidelines that I just said, and there are a number of members in this group. In this organization, I have visited Twin Oaks in Virginia, which has been around for over 50 years. It's an actual commune. Where the group collectively controls the money, owns the land. They have a labor system whereby each member works X number of hours per week. When you come, you're not asked to give the group your assets, but if you do have assets, you are required not to access them while you live there, so that everyone has the same level of resources. Then there's also East Wind in Missouri, which I have also visited. That is also an actual commune. And there are probably at least a few other examples, but Eastwind and Twin Oaks have both been around for a really long time, and they are successful, and I would say they do prove.
So I guess what I'm saying is this hasn't jaded you that much, that you still believe in goodness and, people working together.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, so a funny thing happened to me about 17 years after I found Zendik. I visited for the first time another place in North Carolina called Earth Haven. It's about an hour away from where Zendik Farm used to be. I found out about Earth Haven through someone who had also lived at Zendik. And, when I first left Zendik, I just never wanted to share a kitchen or a bathroom with anyone not related to me ever again.
Makes sense.
But after a while, I as I said, I composted the experience, and I was, open to maybe some version of that. And when I found Earth Haven, again, I just went there to visit with a friend who happened to be going there. But I really fell in love with it, and I really do love it. I don't live there, and I don't know that I ever will, but I've spent a lot of time there, and it is an actual healthy community. It's not a commune. Everyone is responsible for their own money. It's more like a village with a lot of different neighborhoods. There's a ton of interdependence, but there's also there's plenty of sovereignty and autonomy, and to me, that is the best example that I know of a place that really balances the possibility of mutual aid and village life with not only allowing individuals to flourish as individuals, but promoting that flourishing.
But that seems like that's not as common as what you had where you were, where somebody's in charge. And what
you're saying there's probably a ratio for every one really good type of setup like that. There's got to be 4 or 5 of them that are just shams to exploit people for the human resource that they are.
Would you agree with that, Helen?
I'm not saying the 1 to 4 to 5. But
that's why I'm trying to get a number here.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible.
But the majority of them are more like what you experienced, right? Wouldn't you say?
Well, it depends on what you include. Like in the communities directory, there are co-housing communities, for example, that involve really not a whole ton of cooperation. It's much more leaning in the individual direction. There are a lot of those communities. I mean, I would say if you really if you include in the healthy community bucket a wide range of different setups, some of which really don't include a ton of interdependence, you might come out equal. If you're looking at the communities, like the really healthy ones where the people are really, really strongly in it together, versus the cults, probably the cults outnumber those healthy, really tightly interdependent communities.
Well, what was that? What she mentioned something like almost a convention of cults or whatever early on in the show. What was that? That had to be an experience.
It's the annual conference of the International Cultic Studies Association. So it's not a convention of cults, although I could swear there were at least a couple actual current cultists there who were doing PR for their cults. But for the most part, the people who go to that conference are people who've been in cults and people who have loved ones who have been in cults, who are in cults, and people who study cults and who help people get out of cults and recover from cult experiences.
Okay. So there's not a convention of cults. That'd be an interesting screenplay.
No, because if you had a convention of cults, no one would come. Because no cults think that they are cults.
That's fair.
Did you guys have any interaction with other non-cults? Yeah, right.
Yes, we did.
Okay, that I'd like to hear about.
So, like, I remember one time I was at this festival called Music Midtown in Atlanta, and I remember encountering various Hare Krishnas who were trying to sell their horrible little vegetarian cookbook screens, and I was like, "Yes, get away from me!" And I don't want to talk to you further.
You're like, "No, but you want to buy a magazine instead?"
I'll trade you a Bhagavad Gita for one of your magazines.
I was not going to trade them for their bullshit. I remember in New Orleans running into some really scary fundamentalist Christians who were all like, "You look like you're really sad and struggling," which I was. "Can we help you?" I was like, "No, get away from me.
Get away, freak."
And I also remember going to selling this. This was supposed to be the last Fish concert ever in Coventry, Vermont in, I believe, 2004, could have been 2003. And I remember running into this guy who was like running the mate tent for the 12 tribes and like having a really good conversation with him and feeling like he really understood me. At the same time, I noticed that his eyes were kind of weird, and not because he was on drugs. I'm pretty sure that the glazed look in his eye was mirrored in my eyes, but I couldn't see it in my own eyes. But I remember like having a great time with this guy, and later I was like, "Oh yeah, because we were both in cults. That's why I got along so well." Although that didn't work with the Hare Krishnas. The 12 tribes were more of a hippie kind of cult, and I think that made and I got free mate, so that made it easier to relate to that guy than to like the Hare Krishnas.
How many people do you get coming off tour with the Dead or Fish that would join up with you? Does that happen a lot?
There's one there. Let's see. I think there's at least one guy who was like a longtime Zendik who found out about it at a Fish concert. Definitely. Back in the 80s, maybe the 80s or 90s. I'm not sure exactly when because I'm not very familiar with the scene. The Zendiks used to kind of follow the Grateful Dead. That was that was a big part of the selling itinerary.
Sure.
I wonder, did Errol sleep with Jerry Garcia, you think?
You heard it here first,
Yeah,
folks.
I'll bet she did.
I sincerely doubt that. He was a good man. He didn't do a lot of philandering.
Oh, Bob Weir then?
Well, Bob Weir probably.
Yeah, Bob Weir.
Bob
Yeah. Pigpen.
Pigpen was dead in 72, sir.
She was 61. She'd been around a long time.
Yeah, it could have been.
Not Helen. Errol.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm figuring. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Still,
What would you say is the golden age of? I would have thought all this stuff. Maybe the '60s would have been the quote golden age of cults. But I guess maybe am I wrong with that? They're still pretty popular. I guess.
90s.
Well, actually,
90s?
it was really the 70s.
Okay.
The 70s was the golden age of communism. The 60s kind of didn't really start until the 70s, but maybe it goes in waves.
Cycles.
I'm not sure.
Like global warming. Yeah. Had to throw that one in there, but but I mean, yeah, I mean, you would think as like the '60s were a time of agonizing reappraisal and that kind of thing. I think we're kind of heading for that again, right?
Well, I think that in the current crisis, people do seem to have become more interested in growing their own food. I don't know that communes or cults or communal groups are going to see a great resurgence right now.
Though I'll say this: if the apocalypse hits, doomsday went out, or the zombie virus hits, communes are going to be specifically positioned to do well after that. They're already used to living like a community that can self-sustain. So if society around them collapses, a lot of them won't even know
about that, though. They're not built on self-defense what's
it take to put up some walls at that point and make a couple spears?
Yeah, but they're peace lovers. I mean, isn't that part of that pacifism? Isn't that
probably life lovers, but more than peace lovers?
No, not necessarily peace lovers.
Oh, okay, really?
Zendik had lots of guns. Zendik also had a number of members who had come out of the military.
Wow.
Which made sense because the military was a pretty structured way of life with a strong purpose and mission. Also, there's this amazing series of books called The World Made by Hand by James Howard Kunstler, which is it's fiction set in a post-apocalyptic world where there's been a pandemic. Tons of people have died, nuclear bombs, so on and so on. This book is fascinating because it features a small town kind of struggling to stay alive in sort of a democratic way, a cult, a gang, and kind of a version of a clan, I would say. In the cult, in the book, there are a number of former military guys who are total badasses and just like go around like disciplining with their knives and their guns.
I don't know. Was that a little disquieting for you to have all these guns lying around and maybe paramilitary guys around?
I hardly ever saw the guns. I only saw the guns once later on in our time in North Carolina when a man who lived next door killed his girlfriend's lover or something and injured her and then fled. And so there were guys around the perimeter of our farm with guns protecting the perimeter. So I knew the guns were there, but I didn't really see them, so they didn't really bother me.
They ever take you out shooting? You ever asked to go shoot the guns?
No, I did shoot a gun once, but it was in a different homestead somewhere else.
So let's say I had a daughter about your age at the time, is 22, just got out of college and was kind of looking for her way in the world and was flouting society and all its evils. And I was trying to dissuade her from doing something like that and wanted to join a cult. What would you say? What advice would you give?
Well, I would say, yes, there are valid grounds for your disillusionment. And also there are places you can go where people are creating alternative ways to live that are healthy. And I would.
So what should she look for? As far as.
Well, one main thing to look for is the DNA of the group, the community. How was it formed? Was it formed by one person or a couple? Or was it formed by a group of people getting together and all sharing power? Also, how does money work there? Do people have their own money? is it possible before you show up to get a detailed picture of your privileges and your responsibilities? Is it possible to know in advance? Like at Earth Haven, I know at Earth Haven, I need to work, 16 hours per month for the community. I need to work X number of hours per week for my house. I need to pay X dollars for this, X dollars for that. Is it possible to know all those things up front? Also, of course, it can be good to look around the internet and see what people are saying. Generally, if a group has been around for a while and is sketchy, people will be talking about it. I mean, when I moved to Zendik in '99, Google was just getting started. Like, that wasn't really possible, but it is possible now.
I wonder though if those type of things would, somebody really wanted to join a community like that, did you let that stop you? I wouldn't think that would matter. You'd be like, yeah, dude, I'll do whatever.
There's got to be red flags, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I would think people who are really on the search for something like that, whenever they find it, are so ready to join up and be a part of it that a little bit of 16 hours a week doing this, 8 hours a week doing that, that's gonna be like, yeah, definitely, I'm living here. It's my life.
And how do we manipulate people like that to make money for ourselves, Helen?
I don't know.
That's a joke. We would never stoop to that sort of.
I was going to let it fly.
Chicanery.
Let's see where he goes.
So you should really be wary of any leader who says they got special powers or insight, right? Like that's something you should watch out for.
Be wary of anyone that has a leader, right? It should be the power should be evenly distributed, right?
Yeah, and like at Earth Haven, there's a council where anyone who's a member of the. Oh, another thing is that it should be clear. It should be clear how you become a member, how you achieve the full rights and responsibilities of membership. So at Earth Haven, there is a very explicit process, like you do this and you do this, and then you become a provisional member, and then you're a member. And when you're a member, you can go to these councils where you sit in a circle and you can hear proposals and you can suggest things and you can vote, and it's run by consensus. So that's an example of.
If you get to a place and they say, "Don't fucking worry about it," that's probably a red flag, right, Armand?
Well, if you have to sleep with the leader first to be a member, that's probably a bad sign, right? I mean,
that's Armand's rule number one.
That's how David Koresh did it, right?
That's how you
had to yield your wife and your daughters or whatever.
That's true.
So are you currently in anything that you would consider a commune or a cult now?
Well, if I were in anything that was a cult, I would not know it.
Cult might be, what about if you started it? Like you started the cult, and I mean that could be. I'm just saying, I don't know. That's why I was asking. Like,
it's just not my chosen career path.
Sure.
I do have an ongoing relationship with Earth Haven. I go there now and then. I haven't been there, for about probably 6 months or so, but I have a relationship with that place that's very important to me. And a few years ago, I went to visit Dancing Rabbit, which is another eco-village in Missouri. But no, other than that, I don't belong to any.
How do you think these communes are dealing with the COVID crisis right now? Do you think they're actually practicing social distancing, or
what
they
I've
live within their own unit?
What I've heard from in regards to Earth Haven is that people are practicing social distancing to a degree. For example, there used to be, like holding the song circles outside instead of inside. They're definitely very attentive. They created protocols, different levels of protocols for, how to handle the different levels of alarm, over the crisis. There are people in the International Communal Studies Association who are studying that, but it seems like within communes, so right now my social unit is me and my husband, right? So in a commune, I just think it's more likely that your social unit is going to a priori be bigger, and maybe it's just more fluid how they're dealing with it.
Sure, I mean it makes sense. You got definitely every place I'm sure has their own little different way of going about it, and.
Why would you say you were so, disillusioned with society or civilization after you graduated? What did you take at Harvard? What was your major?
I majored in visual and environmental studies,
Okay.
which was basically a fancy way of describing visual art. I made things, including sculptures and installations, out of things like tape and toilet paper and trash bags and balloons.
Oh, okay.
I think why I was so... Okay, so before I went to Harvard, I was... It wasn't that I was super focused on getting into a good school. I had just decided when I was 6 that I was going to Harvard, and then I just did my thing in school and didn't apply anywhere else and went. But I did. But before I went there, I did think it was going to be an amazing experience. I thought that I was going to finally belong in that place because I wouldn't stick out so much as like, the nerd and the smart one or whatever.
Were you ostracized as a child? Like, were you a nerd like the rest of us?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Like my sisters and I, like we were the weird ones at our little Catholic school in Brooklyn. We were made fun of. We were definitely the freaks in our community. But so I thought Harvard was going to be this fairy tale, and it wasn't. And when I graduated, I just like I looked around and I didn't see really any path that my classmates were taking that made sense to me. Going into banking or consulting or law school or medical school or graduate school or whatever. I had this really strong feeling that like all of these paths just had to do with keeping the machine rolling the way it already was. And the machine just seemed to me like it was actually killing everything. And it wasn't necessarily even an ecological critique, because at the time I did kind of think, well, the earth will suck us off when she's good and ready. That's a human problem. But I think what I really objected to was just moment murder, actually, like just signing up to go sit in an office building and have a job for decades and decades and do something that you didn't necessarily care about in order to be successful and make money. And that was kind of what I saw as being the default option. And it didn't make any sense to me.
And I got to tell you, that's exactly what I signed up for, is that 9 to 5, do the bullshit job. Sorry, no offense to everybody sitting here.
Yeah,
part of the
whatever.
job. But just to be able to be happy, like, and have my peace every couple hours a night at home, I find those couple of hours of peace at home to be worth all the hubjub.
With 2 kids, you have peace at home?
Well, I have to wait for everybody to go to bed. I get my peace from about 11 o'clock at night to 1 in the morning. So,
Helen, do you think that the Earth is flat? Have you heard about that conspiracy?
Did you watch that? Did you listen to our show?
I've listened to your Heaven's Gate and your Joseph McCarthy.
Oh,
I've not listened to your Flat Earth. I've heard about that theory. I don't believe it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Well, that's a cult. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Flat Earthers.
You know what I
Fucking
found
cult for
interesting
sure.
though in your book though, it seems like when you first got there, it seemed like the women were trying to going out of their way not to be attractive. What was that all about?
That?
I don't
Why
know. You
do
seem
say
like
that?
you were called them machismo or whatever, that they were wearing boots and that they were.
But they were also wearing very super low cut shirts. I would not say they were going out of their way not to be attractive. I thought they were.
Look at the style. She's talking late 90s here. That was kind of the style. Those type of boots and whatnot was big.
Yeah, but like baggy, but it didn't seem like it was becoming.
It sounded like they were the average Lollapalooza.
You're getting me confused with the other Zendiks. I was the one who wore the baggy overalls every single day.
Right.
The other Zendik women wore tight jeans and whatever. They were hot. I was not.
Oh, okay.
I mean, when I showed up, I was kind of in denial of my femininity.
Yeah, I mean, I know they were talking about you had a little BO problem and stuff.
Yes, I did.
Don't we all?
Been there.
I was living in a barn.
All right. She's like, what the fuck do you want from me?
yeah, right.
Okay.
You're
There's
living in
no
a stable.
shower, right? No fucking deodorant.
Yeah.
Of course that'd be
You sleep
I get
with
it.
horses, you wake up with that shit smell. Yeah, okay.
Helen, could you
Makes
tell us anything more about your book to get our viewers and listeners out there to go after?
Yes, it's a good book. I've been reading it.
So it's a page turner, number one. I have had multiple reports of people staying up way too late in order to get through it. Part of my purpose in writing the book was to bring the reader into this experience beat by beat. like, here's how this happens. I'm not hitting you over the head with like, this is what a cult is, this is how it works, and these are all the signs. It's just like, here is my experience. Come, follow me into this cult that kind of seems interesting and seductive. And oh, look, it all goes terribly wrong. But it's also written to read like a novel, you know, like scene by scene, lots of excitement, lots of cliffhangers, some sex scenes as well.
Nice.
And you can get it at my website, helenzuman.com. You can get a signed copy directly from me. You can also get it wherever books are sold, including bookshop.org, which is a better online option than Amazon. And it might even be in your local library, or you can request it from your library.
Have you sold the screenplay rights yet?
I have not. Are you interested?
Maybe. Talk to me. Yeah, could be a movie. I'm seeing a movie.
Quite prolific screenwriter.
Yeah, I've written quite a few. So, yeah, we'll keep in touch on that one.
He actually wrote Caddyshack. Have you ever seen that?
That was Harold Ramis. I know you're wrong there.
I haven't.
I was a ghostwriter on that one. Yeah.
Oh,
don't tell anybody.
Do you have any plans for another book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on a novel that is kind of loosely based on my day job as a editing college application essays.
Sure.
And it involves a presidential election in which the Republicans and Democrats have merged into the Republicrats. Oh. And there's a new party called Dirt First.
Dirt First.
At some point. And it also probably involves the eventual dissolution of the union. But it's a big mess right now, and I'm just
it's first draft.
Working on it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's also a Scottish-English subplot.
Scottish.
Wow.
Scottish against English.
English.
So is that what you're doing now? You're a novelist?
I mean, no. I've written a lot of words for this project. That's a sort of small part of my work. I also have this day job. I do, other editing work and run my homestead with my husband and work as a book. I have a patchwork kind of life.
I someday hope to make it as a homesteader. I honestly do. I watch homesteading videos on YouTube all the time.
Yeah, your life's kind of a pastiche too, isn't it?
Man, right now I'm so looking for acreage. I've been holding out for a few years to find the right plot out in the country so I can live that kind of life.
What life?
Where I grow my own food. I've got animals. It sounds crazy because you
grow my own food.
That's what I want for in my life. Exactly. Grow my own weed outside. The prying eyes of my neighbors.
Just let my crops and children grow.
It's more about privacy for me than any kind of like specific ethos. I want to be prepared for just in case shit goes bad.
Everett doesn't like people.
I don't really dig people. That's fair, but it's not that I don't like people. I wish well for everyone. Just I wish well for you on the other side of the room.
He fucking hates all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just me. Anyway, Helen, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah,
we appreciate
thanks.
talking.
Very interesting.
This is really cool to dive down deep into this. We don't get this opportunity a lot, so we
right.
It.
All kinds of questions were answered for me.
Well, you answered every question we had with grace and speed
and candor.
Right, and we're a couple of idiots here too. So like you were pretty good with Everett with us. Well, 3 idiots, a trio of idiots.
At least one of us.
At least me.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much.
It's been a blast.
And can you tell them where to find your book one more time?
Yeah. Pitch your book again.
HelenZuman.com, HelenZuman.com. If you go there and go to book, you will see all the links to all the places where you can get it, including to the signed copies. And also, if you go to HelenZuman.com and sign up for my mailing list, you can get an excerpt from the book for free.
Sweet. All right, Helen, thank you very much. I hope to be in touch with you again sometime. If you ever get around to writing that book, let us know, and we'll take a look at it.
I'm gonna adapt
get
this
around
book.
to it.
I'll adapt this
All right.
If you ever join another cult,
I'll give you $1 option on that book. Okay.
We'd love to talk with you about it.
All right. Thanks again, Helen. Have a good day.
Helen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You too.
Bye, ma'am.
Well, that was fun.
It was really fun.
That was a lot of fun, actually.
And we hope you guys had a good time talking about her.
Yeah, we had fun.
Well, we had another cult member on the show, or former cult member on the show before, Fred, who was on he was our expert for the.
Oh yeah, I forgot it.
The Manson family. He wrote a book on the Manson family, but he himself grew up in a cult. He didn't know it was a cult at the time because he was growing up in it. He thought it was life. His parents were members and everything, but these days he's actually working on another book.
I had a friend that wrote a book on Manson too. Actually went to visit him at the cell and everything. Yeah, really had but I read the book and it's like, can you imagine she's asking him questions about why'd you do this or whatever. Man's like,
he's a fucking whack
yeah.
job,
I mean,
dude.
he's like talking
He's
about
so
the dragon
full of
and
shit.
yeah. Well, yeah. He's
You
just
don't know he doesn't
rambling,
believe that shit.
right?
He's just trying to put.
rambling on. So
I have so much trouble.
Stupid.
So much problems with Manson. He was a piece of shit. Too pussy to do anything himself. You know what I mean? He's the worst type of man beating
Now he
short
went on.
man.
He went with the tape,
Or
the
woman.
LaBianca one, didn't he?
No, he
was
wasn't
on that one.
He was
wasn't
not there
He didn't.
What'd they get him for?
for basically giving the order, more or less. Go do this. Go kill the
Really?
pigs. Yeah.
You sure about that?
Yeah, it was text. It was the three.
He
girls
wasn't on
and
the LaBianca with Folger, the second one. Didn't he go on that one himself?
We have to double
He
check.
didn't go on the first one.
I don't think he went on either.
Not
To be
that-
honest with you.
Fuck
I
does it matter?
thought they fucked that one up, and he's I'll do it myself, but I'm not sure. I read
well, I'll
Helter
defer to you.
Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi.
Fucking guys.
These fucking guys. All right, guys.
Ulyanich, Ilyanov.
We doing a wrap up show here in 15. You guys
Might
wanna
as
do a
well.
wrap-up show?
All right.
Cool, cool.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll be back in about 15. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Helen.
Thank you, Helen.
for being on the show with us,
guest,
and
yeah.
we'll see you guys here in a few. Thanks a bunch.
Vladimir Ulyanich Ilyanov.
That's Lenin.
Yeah, I mean, what's the next line ever? Come on. Vladimir Ulyanich Ilyanov.
Life does not start and stop at your convenience. All right, we'll see you all in a few.